Hi everyone, welcome to episode 39 of the Startup Playbook Podcast. My name is Rohit Bhargava, and each week I interview successful founders, investors, and subject matter experts on how they got started, the strategies they used to succeed, and their advice to current and future entrepreneurs. Just a quick announcement from me before we get into this episode. Last week we launched a new project called Startup Playbook TV, which is all about providing exposure to early stage startups and founders and helping them navigate the challenges of starting a business. The first 3 episodes featuring Remind, Akagu, and Delish Meals are now on YouTube, with new episodes launching every Thursday. You can view the episodes by searching for Startup Playbook TV on YouTube or by going to the link bit.do/startupplaybook.tv, which I will also include in the show notes for you. I'm always looking for new startups to feature on the show, so if you're interested in getting involved, shoot me an email at rohit@startupplaybook.co. So coming back to episode 39, this episode is a recording of my live podcast interview with Nick Crocker from last week. Nick was the founder of We Are Hunted, a digital music chart which sold to Twitter in 2012. He then co-founded Sessions, a digital health coaching program which sold to MyFitnessPal 2 years later. After MyFitnessPal was acquired by Under Armour for $475 million, he went on to lead their product strategy and operations in San Francisco. Nick is now back in Australia and is the Melbourne Partner at Blackbird Ventures, a $230 million venture capital firm that counts companies such as Canva, Redbubble, Shoes of Prey, Culture Amp, and Edrolo as part of its portfolio, and he also runs the Startmate Accelerator program. In this interview, we talk about the importance of proving your business on a small scale, what the best companies focus on, what to do when you first meet with an investor, and the importance of culture and values when it comes to building a successful business. There are also some questions by the audience in attendance. It wasn't quite picked up by the mic, but I've included the questions in the show notes, which are available at startupplaybook.co. So, without further ado, here is my interview with Nick Crocker. Hi Nick, welcome to the Startup Playbook Podcast, and thanks for taking the time to be here today.
Pleasure, thank you.
And going to the gauntlet of a live podcast session as well.
Yeah, I'm ready.
So for those people that may not be as familiar with you or your background, can you share a little bit of your story and what sort of got you here today?
Yeah, so I grew up in Queensland, went to UQ, did law political science, was extremely mediocre at both of those, and was a journalist during uni, and I was writing about music, and I was the first employee of a music startup called Musicadium, which was, at the time, like, my thinking was getting paid $55,000 a year to spend time with musicians was like the best thing that I could ever imagine. I just couldn't believe that you could get paid to do something like that. So I did that for a year, and it was a great experience, but like I sort of transitioned out of that. You can still find it today. It's called The 9 Ways to Ride the Digital Music Wave. And it was an ebook that I wrote in 2009. And it got really popular at the major labels, like the marketing teams would download them. And so I kind of got a name for myself as this like digital music guy in 2009, like giving tips on how to optimize your MySpace page, which sounds funny now, but it was a big deal back in the day. And so I basically built a consulting business out of being a music guy. And so spent like an incredible year doing work with EMI and Universal and MySpace and Virgin and BB and all these. Everyone has a music strategy, so it was like a real little moment in time bringing together digital and music. And then we did the side project called We Are Hunted out of that, which ended up becoming a pretty popular website. So that was sort of the start of it. And then seven years ago, I moved to the US. I joined a startup called Boxy. And I worked with this guy called Zach Klein, who had been like an internet hero of mine for a long time. And he invented Vimeo, and he did College Humor before that. He's gone on to do a bunch of amazing things. If any of you have ever been to cabinporn.com, that's Zach's site. It's beautiful cabins. They've now released a book. So he's just this incredible creative guy, probably one of the most brilliant product thinkers of sort of our generation. And Vimeo is the best evidence of that. And so I just wanted to go and basically be his apprentice for a year. So he joined Boxy, became head of product. They raised money from Spark and Union Square, and then I thought, man, this is what I want to do. So I changed my Facebook, I changed my Facebook bio and added him cold, and he wrote back and was like, "Oh, I love We Are Hunted," and I was like, "I'm in." So we had a Skype call, and I asked him if he would employ me, and he said, "No." I said, all right, I'll fly myself out and I'll work for you for a month for free, and then if at the end of it you don't want to employ me, that's fine. But in my mind I was like, being in the best city in the world for a month, working for like one of my internet heroes, there's no downside, and ended up getting a job out of it. So like actually the Thursday of the first week that I was there, they went, oh, actually there's this thing we want you to work on, and it was just like rolled from there. So I've been in the US for the past 7 years. I went from Boxy to my own startup, which was called Sessions, which was digital health coaching. And I went from we sold that to MyFitnessPal in 2013 or 14, and then a year later MyFitnessPal got bought by Under Armour. So I spent the last 3 years at MyFitnessPal and then MyFitnessPal / Under Armour. And honestly, of all of the experiences, the last 2 years at Under Armour were the best that I ever had professionally. Just like staggeringly good company, working for like brilliant people. And then came back to Australia in November of last year, and we'd raised money from Blackbird Ventures. I'd co-invested in Startmate. I knew Nicky really well, got to know Rick, absolutely loved the team, loved their portfolio. And when I realised I was moving home, it was like that was the one place I wanted to be. So now I'm a Blackbird Ventures investor.
Fantastic. So obviously I want to come back to some of your experience with Under Armour and obviously Blackbird and Startmate as well. But going back to the earlier stage of, you wanting a job at Boxy.
Yeah.
I see this a lot with a lot of early stage or people that want to be part of the startup community and not really know how to approach or engage people, at companies that they want to work for, people that they want to work under, or just be involved in the ecosystem. How do you suggest someone sort of take that initial step of not necessarily coming in with a background in the space, either just sort of graduating from uni or still studying or looking for a transition in their career? How do you suggest that they make that first step?
Yeah, it's sort of a lot more about what you do than what you say. So sometimes we get emails to Blackbird where it'll be like, I absolutely love startups. It's like, okay. And then so you're just trying to see like what would the evidence be. So like there's lots of ways that you could get involved in startups, just helping them, going to things like this, meeting people, building your own projects. Like we're just kind of looking for like actual evidence of like that you do what you say. And I think you'd be surprised. I think like my entire career has been built on people saying yes to coffees when they probably honestly didn't have the time. And so I think a lot of people in technology feel that way. And so like when you ask for help, it's surprising how willing people are to help if you can really see that the intent is there and there's some like hustle and some drive. And they're just like honestly like aren't that many great people going around. And so when you sort of see a sliver of someone who like could be great, you just want to like do everything you can to help. So I mean the basic advice is just do it. Like I got an email from someone the other day. They said, I love startups, and they listed like 5 degrees that they've done. And I was like, if you really love startups, you wouldn't have done 5 degrees. Like you would have just done a startup or joined a startup, or like, I don't know, there just has to be some evidence there of you doing it. And I think, like I'd been somewhat successful when I went to Boxy. I still had to be like, lay myself there, like it's free, I'll cover everything, I know I'm not going to get a job out of this. Like I think like if the hunger's there, good people will pick up on it. But it has to be genuine, it has to be authentic.
Sure. And obviously wanted to touch on some of your experience with We Are Hunted and Sessions. What was it like, sort of, you obviously had a really big sort of passion and interest in the music space.
Yeah.
What was it like, so again, for someone who's at the very early stages of their journey and looking to turn what they think is a great idea into a startup, what does that sort of process look like? Or what did that look like for you in those early stages?
Yeah, so I was just obsessed with music, and there was a website that I had in my mind that didn't exist, and that was like what We Are Hunted became was that website. And we were just actually really fortunate that the group of people that launched We Are Hunted were like, there was a brilliant team of engineers that did it and some brilliant designers. And I was honestly, that's like, We Are Hunted is like a lightning strike. Like there's no replicable model. It's like, there's no lesson from it. It's just like sometimes you get really lucky, and the thing that you make turns out to be a thing that a bunch of other people like. Sessions was more replicable, where I started out wanting to do, if anyone cycles here, we started Sessions the same year that Rafa launched, the cycling brand. And we were like, man, what Rafa is doing for cycling, we should do for running. And I realized after about 2 weeks of customer interviews, I just was not going to make a great clothing brand. So then I was thinking, well, what is the core of what I'm trying to do here? And I was like, I just want to make people healthier. And that's when I was like, it was actually like, we got into Rock Health, which is like an accelerator in SF, off the back of the kind of, actually no, it evolved. Then it was Foursquare meets Meetup for sport, and that didn't work. And then we got into Rock Health, and on the first day we were like, what the hell are we doing? We were like, we just want to help people be healthier. So we were like, all right, well, let's just actually do that. Like, I just started doing that. So I put a Facebook message out. There were 30 people, I think, who responded. I think 12 of them agreed that I could coach them. And then we just started building. So like, there was someone in Germany. So the first thing we built was the ability for me to send text messages in the future to these people. So it's just like little stuff like that. So it's just, the foundation of Sessions was like, the first 6 months was the best like building experience I've ever had, because it was me and Ben and just these customers, and like I would figure out this stuff that was breaking, and me and Ben would be like, how come Ben is my co-founder? How do we fix this? And then Ben would build it, and then we'd see if it fixed it, and it was kind of like startup heaven. It gets complicated after that bit, but yeah, it's amazing how people go very broad very quickly, and really all that matters is like a very narrow, small subset of like passionate people who love what you do. I think that matters a lot more than like, oh, we have 100,000 customers, in a month. Like that's the bit that I think is sort of non-obvious about doing startups. Like you just have to prove it on a really small scale, so long as the passion of the users is really high. I think that's oversimplifying it, but that's hopefully some way of an answer.
Talking of oversimplifying, so you mentioned that you went through a couple of different pivots of what Sessions was and what it looked like. Do you think that sort of simplifying and going back to the core of what it is that you were trying to solve was a big part of the push? Like, did you see?
Yeah. So on the first day of the program, we all had to get up and say what we were doing, and by that point, we knew that we weren't doing what we'd got into, and it was like, I could probably go back and find this Skype transcript. I was shitting myself because I was Skyping my wife. I was like, I was going to be away from her for 5 months. I was like, I don't know what I've done. Like, I don't know why I'm here. I don't know what we're going to work on. It was like 4 o'clock. We had to present. I had 2 hours. So I had like not a panic attack, but borderline. Just sitting there like, oh my God, what? And then it was just like, at that point I was like fully humbled. Like I had messed it up twice. I was about to mess it up a third time. I was like, hold on. What is the core thing that we are trying to do? And then, I don't know, it was just like, yeah, it was just this moment of realness. Like I had all these ideas about, and you kind of have to have that kind of, like look into the eyes of death and like to really realize what's going on. I don't know what your original question was. I just think I answered a different question.
Yeah, no, it was, so the question was like, does simplifying it and going back to the core, is that something that you've seen as a trend in startups that have gone on to be?
No.
Okay.
I think that was just I think that's end of one. My story. Yeah.
Sure. And so fast forwarding the story with Sessions to you exiting, most startup founders have a really big vision of what it is that they want to create and how they sort of see themselves with, the huge exit and hundreds of people working under them. What did that process look like for you in deciding to sell the company? Was that something that you were sort of consciously looking for? Did that opportunity come to you? What was that process, and was it difficult for you to make that decision to sell?
Yeah, so I wanted to work on Sessions forever. There was a company that started a year before us called Omada Health, which did what we were doing, but we were doing it focusing on physical activity. They were focusing on diabetes prevention. And our goal was to put 100,000 people through our program by this year. And I just read a press release that Omada has just done that. And there was this kind of sense that when I read that, I was like, oh, like kind of like a pang of longing or something that they got to do what we sort of set out to do and couldn't. So I thought Sessions was what I was going to do forever. But we got bought 2 years in, and it was 21 months into it was when we first met MyFitnessPal, and the deal closed in 3 months. It's pretty complicated actually why we sold it, but the short version is we just thought we could be our original thesis was we can make people have better lives by helping them to be healthier. And MyFitnessPal at that time I think had 40 million users, and we had 250. And I just couldn't see how I could close that gap from 250 to 40 million any reasonable space of time. And it just like, quite frankly, like I loved Mike and Albert from day one, the founders. Like when I remember we had a Skype call and we got off our first Skype call with them, and we were like, that was so good. Like we just straight away just couldn't believe the connection that we had with these guys. And they built the best app and the best like health app. It still is the best health app of all time. It's up to 110 million users, I think, now. So we just realized that like going it alone no longer made sense relative to the alternative path of joining MyFitnessPal. And there's a whole lot of other complex side reasons, but ultimately like we were absolutely thrilled about that team. Like we were such believers in Mike and Albert, the brothers who founded MyFitnessPal. Like from day one, they were like our kind of people, and it just didn't feel like I just couldn't see us getting to 40 million users in under like 15 years. So I was like, maybe we just go do it with them. That was something that was like core to their philosophy. It just made total sense. But I wish we were still, part of me wishes we were still going. We had put 100,000 people through our program. That's where the biggest impact is, and like it's sort of like there's part of me that wishes we did that.
Sure. I mean, every situation is different, but you've been through a couple of exit situations previously. What are some of the things that maybe aren't as frequently talked about when a startup or when a founder has that opportunity to exit their business? What's a bit of advice that you can give to anyone that's in that position?
It's very distracting. So if you're going to sell your company, like you can't really do anything. It's like fundraising. It's a full-time job. It's absurdly stressful. So I got so stressed through the sale process. I must have been clenching my jaw, but it locked at one point, and I couldn't open my mouth. So I was doing these phone calls with potential acquirers, like, yeah, going really well, thanks. And there's a photo of me like on the ground, just like with my hand, just trying to like we had 3 people in the team, like in the founding team, and one of them took a photo of me like on the ground of our Airbnb, just like, when am I going to send the term sheets? Like people probably, you underestimate like how all consuming it is, because it's also like the real risk is that you pre-bank the transaction before it all goes, because there's so many steps from like, yeah, we want to buy you, to term sheet to deal close. It's like a really, really long path. And so I think people underestimate how all-consuming it is, underestimate how stressful it is, even in small transactions. Just like, it's kind of like you're all in bet, because basically at that, like once you're there on the table to be sold, it's really hard to be like, oh, you know what, team, let's get back, psych, we're not doing it. Yeah. It's just like, you really, and I don't know, it was incredibly consuming. I don't think people realize. I think people go, oh, you sold your company, like you must be stoked. Like most people are just like, oh, like just it's just a sense of relief at the end usually. And there's just so many points along the way where it goes wrong. Like that's one thing I have learned is like how many people have interest, like people are interested in acquiring them. That number of people is large. The number of people who turn like acquisition interest into an actual deal is really small, just because there are so many variables.
Sure. And so you sold to MyFitnessPal, and then MyFitnessPal sold to Under Armour, and you mentioned a little bit earlier that was some of the best professionally years of your life. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what were some of the experiences and what were some of the things that you took away from your time over there? Yeah,
so I was like, it's a pretty amazing, MyFitnessPal is a pretty amazing story. So they raised $18 million of funding from Sequoia and Kleiner, and then a year later sold for $475 million in cash. So it's an amazing business story. 110 million people, downloaded MyFitnessPal, but like hundreds of thousands of them are actually alive today because of the change they made. Like that's not a exaggeration. Like it is so transformative what it gives to people. It's free. Like this is if you think about like health and fitness as a world, it's very like scammy. Like, there's a lot of fucking shakes that are going to save your life. Like MyFitnessPal takes what is like the most stressful thing to people, their health, and makes it simple to them. So like, it was so good to be inside a company. Like I remember I made a change to the onboarding flow, which increased our day 0 logging. So do you log food on day 0? And then when I like calculated like through the funnel how many extra people would hit their weight goal as a result of that, it was like 45,000 or something extra people through one small product change were going to like hit their weight goal. And you're like when you work at scale like that, the leverage is pretty staggering. So like, it's a really incredible business story. It's actually an incredibly good business. Like, it does good for the world. But primarily it was like, when you're doing a startup, it's hard to have great people around you because it's just you. So mostly like, am I doing the right thing? You know, someone can come in for half an hour and give you a bit of advice. It's of sort of negligible value. When you actually see over multiple years how a great team operates and how how much preserving culture matters, how much putting product at the center of the organization matters, how much having like a mature culture and a culture where people respect each other matters. And you think, oh, those all sound like nice to haves, but when you actually go through the journey, you're like, oh no, that's the value. Like when you get acquired, you know, and the team is all nervous, you basically have to just trust in your leaders. And you can only have, like, where there's not that trust there or where that breaks down, like, this gets really, really messy. So I got to see the value of like high integrity, culture oriented, product oriented, kind of Silicon Valley success. I got to like live that for 3 years every day. And it's hard to unsee that. It's kind of very like deeply changes the way you think about the world and the way you like structure your life in terms of what you optimize for and the people you want to spend time with. And so it was awesome. Like I left in November of last year, but the day I left, I was still doing stuff where I was like, oh my God, I don't know how we're going to do this. Like it was every day I learned something new, something where I was like completely out of my depth in terms of knowing how we'd solve it, and then watching it play out and being like, oh, you know, that's how you ask some other business for $15 million, or that's how you like scale product to 100 million users, or that's how you like hire great engineers, or like, there's just so many things that it's hard to imagine or like hard to really learn from. You can learn the theory of those things, but then you see it. It's really transformative. But ultimately, I've said it multiple times. Like, it comes down to Mike and Albert, the founders, and believing in them as kind of unique, outlying individuals.
Yeah, that was about to be my next question of like, where does that structure, where does that sort of focus come from, and at what stage does
it's the founders, and it's day one. So like, your culture at 12 is the culture at 120 is the culture at 1200. The whole company will like map to the founders' biorhythms. So like, Mike and Albert both had families. They were like, good guys, and so if you can't, like, those guys would leave to be with their families at the end of the day, and the company maps to that. But you know what else? Like, when they were in the office, there was no fucking around, and so there was like a really efficient culture of like, don't be seen to be doing something that's not useful, because it just like as a community, it was like self-police that wasn't something. There's just no sort of like slack in the system. So. And that was just a reflection of those two. So I think one of the things that's come out of it is my bias towards founders being the things that matter. And you can't, I don't know, I think it's hard. Like, again, basically what you are at 12 is what you'll be at 12,000.
Sure. And so, like, speaking more about sort of culture and structure and what you saw in SF, how does that sort of compare or translate to what you've seen in Australia through your relatively limited time since you've been back? But
I think it's all the same. Like the best companies, or the companies I'm most excited about working with, have like incredibly strong culture. Product sits at the center of the organization. I should probably explain this because it's not totally clear. So in every organization, one part of the organization will be the dominant part of the organization. So it might be sales, it might be product, it might be design, it might be engineering, it might be biz dev. But the best Silicon Valley companies historically have been product-driven companies. And so what that means is when there's a big like all tension between sales and marketing and BD, and product is kind of the group responsible for pulling it through, and product is ultimately answerable to users. So like, I think one thing that honestly like is depressing about Australia right now is like the lack of, like, our most valuable companies by market cap honestly don't give a shit about their customers. And then you don't have to ask them, just use their products, be on hold with them for 45 minutes. Like, they do not give a shit. And it was like, it's depressing. Like, it's like we all live our lives, interacting with these companies. And so I think one thing that really inspires me, within our portfolio, is the product orientation, incredibly strong cultures. Like, as an example, I don't think they'll mind me saying this, but I went to Culture Amp's one of our portfolio companies. We used Culture Amp at Under Armour. It was an incredible product. But I was able to sit in on their product meeting the other day. And I've been doing product meetings for 3 years. And so every week, same meeting, at some point, the energy sort of levels out a little bit, and people are just kind of they do the work, but there's no. At the end of the Culture Amp product meeting, everyone clapped. And I was like, what is going on here? But that really matters. It's those little things, and you go, oh, that's just a random group clapping, but that stuff really endures. And so I'm really inspired. Shoes of Prey is another example where their emphasis on customer support is unparalleled in Australia. How deeply they've focused on that as they've grown as a business is so inspiring to me. What I like about Blackbird is the values that I loved about my fitness pal are evident in a lot of our portfolio companies. And I'm deeply biased towards culture-focused, product-heavy CEO, game-changing CEO-led companies. Game-changing is a terrible word. What's the shape-shifting CEOs? I'm just all in on that mix.
Sure. So I guess focusing a bit more on Blackbird now. And you've touched on some of the points over here, but what are specifically some of the things that Blackbird looks for, and at what stage does Blackbird look to start working with startup founders?
As soon as possible is the answer to when. The sooner that we can build a relationship with someone, the better. And that can be a relationship if we invest in you, or that can be a relationship if you're just someone in our community who we can ask questions, invite you to things that we host, get referrals from you to founders that you love. So the sooner that we can build a relationship, the better. Actually, in terms of what we look for, the best answer is there's a blog post called What Blackbird is Looking For. But at a high level, we like Australian founders who are building global companies. We like deeply technical teams, or teams where the advantage comes from software. We like short feedback cycles, so you can go and put a product in front of a customer, get feedback, make it better in the space of days, if not weeks. We like short sales cycles, so we don't love the idea of steak dinners with CTOs at Telstra. We love keep in mind that Mike, CEO of Atlassian, and Nikki, co-founder of Blackbird, they had a company together before Atlassian. So the DNA of Atlassian, of any engineer can pick out the credit card and start using it. That's really deeply embedded in how we think. And we also look, when we look at the best Australian companies, there's a repeat pattern to that. So we love kind of bottoms up. Anyone in the organisation can start using the product, and it can spread from there, rather than it takes us a year and a half to sell it to a bunch of dudes with white hair.
So in terms of Blackbird's been around for a while, and obviously you've had some major successes, but what are some of the things as a fund that you're willing to kind of share around things that you wish that you've done differently, or things that the fund has sort of learnt over time?
Yeah, I've been there 3.5 months and I haven't really done anything. So for me to sit here and be well, here's the mistakes that they made, would be I couldn't really say that. I think as you look through the portfolio, one of the biggest shifts that you can see is our conviction has gone up over time, and we've moved to a place where we are extremely high conviction, and we tend not to kind of put small checks where we're sort of I think, so I'll give you the specific example is Sessions raised a $750,000 round, and Blackbird put $150,000 into that round. So we probably wouldn't, that was the 4th investment ever. Probably we wouldn't do that again. We'd either love Sessions enough to invest the whole round, or 500 of the 750, or we wouldn't do it at all. So I'd say conviction has gone up over time, and the importance of conviction has become clearer and clearer. I think we've probably underestimated maybe as a fund how great the Startmate teams go on to be. So that's a mistake that like we won't make again. Like we're acutely aware that the best Startmate teams in each batch generally go on to be really great companies. I can't think of any others, but again, it's very early for me, and I think so far, it's definitely, no one would sit at Blackbird saying like we're a success, like it's all TBD, but I think the thing that gives us the most excitement and hope is the portfolio of companies that we get to work with every day, the founders of those companies, the teams that they're building, and the products that they're making is like pretty inspiring. We have a wall in the office with all the logos of the companies we invest in, and it's like I have it on my phone and I continually screenshot it, so it's the most recent thing in my camera roll, because I'm always like referring back to it, like who can I introduce you, who's someone in the portfolio that could help. Like it's just an awesome wall, and I think our awesome wall is like, again, it's all TBD, but we feel really good about some of the founders we're able to have partnered with so far.
Sure. I've spoken to a number of investors on the podcast about what it is that they look for in startup founders, but I'd be really keen from your experience of raising funds from Blackbird and being a startup founder yourself. What are some of the things that founders should look for in investors when looking to take on funding?
So the single source of truth for investors is the portfolio companies, the CEOs of the portfolio companies. But it's probably also worth asking the companies that the fund didn't invest in what that experience was like. So I know that's a short answer, but like it's all about reference checking with founders in the portfolio and founders who you can just ask, who are some founders that you really liked but didn't invest in that I could speak to get a sense of what the fund is like. Because how you say no is like, you end up saying no a lot more than you say yes. So actually there's more data points on what a fund is like from the no bucket than the yes. And so it's really important to dig into that. I actually don't think anything else matters. Another rough proxy would just be, did any of those companies go on to be valuable, and did the fund invest in them early? But I think sort of the source of truth for us lies in how our founders talk about us when we're not in the room.
Sure. So it's just about doing your research as much as the investors would.
Yeah, like you'd be surprised how often that doesn't happen. It's such an easy hack for a founder to do. I think what happens is the bright lights of cash sometimes like blind founder, or like you'll be willing to overlook stuff. Oh, that founder was not totally in on what they're doing, but I could really do with 500 grand right now. So I understand it. I've definitely been there where I'm like, I'm willing to overlook. This is not relating to Blackbird, but certainly, there were companies we met where we're like, it doesn't feel quite right, but god damn, do we need the money? So I think that's basically where it breaks down. Like sometimes there's no choice, but if you have the choice, go with the founders that go with the founders.
Yeah. And in terms of so Startmate is an accelerator program that's associated or run by Blackbird.
Yeah.
How do you see the structure of the Startmate program and Blackbird either playing together or being kind of their own sort of separate structures?
Yeah, well, Nicky founded Startmate before he founded Blackbird. Startmate was started in 2011, and like there's a straight line from Startmate to Blackbird. Those are values of those two organizations are the same. The community of people is the same. Lots of crossover of portfolio companies. Startmate gives Blackbird the ability to spend a lot of time with a lot of founders at the early stage. And because it's all so messy and unclear at the beginning, you never quite know how it's all going to play out. It's actually like an amazing way to build a lot of data points really quickly on what it's like to be an early stage startup. And now you can say, oh well, we know what Casey from Bugcrowd was like in 2013. We also now know what he's like with this incredible company that he's built. And so it gives you it makes you less scared, I think, early on of the mess, because you can see the mess and the churn in those early days, and you're like, well, actually, it doesn't matter. There's these companies go on to be valuable regardless. So it's awesome grounding, and I think for all of us, it's a passion project, because it's just genuinely fun to spend time with the founders at the early stage. It's like you could do it 15 hours a day and not run out of energy, because it's just, you get so much good in doing it, and it's so enjoyable. I think for us at least, but yeah, it's a huge part of who we are as a fund. It's huge. It's like central to our culture. It's it's like where a lot of Blackbird's values were kind of birthed. Obviously I'm a big believer.
Speaking of reference points, again, a lot of investors on the podcast have mentioned, we invest in lines, not dots. And you mentioned that, it's never too early to start building those relationships as well. At what point does that relationship tip over, if at any? Obviously, every situation is different, but at what point does that situation sort of tip over from, we've got a really healthy relationship to, okay, let's seriously look at this as an investment opportunity for us?
So the tipping point is when the founder asks for the money, and then we have to say yes or no. The lines not dots thing is like, it's surprising the number of people who say that, but my counter, or the slight twist on it is like, make sure the dots are good. So not all dots are good. So there are founders who reach out too early, or they haven't thought things through, and then so our first impression is they didn't really think this through, and that's the first dot. So it's fine. It's not going to be the end of the discussion, but you ideally want a series of dots that line up in a really clear and coherent way. We can go from meeting a team to making a decision pretty quickly, and sometimes we build long-term relationships with people, and we kind of definitely there's been founders in the portfolio where we've gone, God, I can't wait till this person starts a company. Then you kind of have that moment where they pitch and you're like, I really hope they're going to pitch me something good. And they pitch you something good and you're like, finally. But it's different in every case. Safety culture was an introduction from Michael Fox, who's the CEO of Shoes of Prey. Zooks was an introduction of Andrew Dever, who's a friend of the fund, who's based out in SF and Utah. Didier from Culture Amp came through the Atlassian guys. The way we meet founders is sort of very, very random and sort of all over the place. Although the 3 examples I just gave were not random; they were all references from portfolio founders. But maybe there's something to that.
Sure. So again, you mentioned sometimes it can be not harmful, but not the best situation to meet if you haven't sort of fully formed what it is that you're working on, or sort of fully formed the value proposition that you're coming in there with. What should that ideal sort of first dot look like to you?
I think it's really important up front to be like, we are not raising money. I'm here to ask you X. Because if you're kind of 45 minutes in and then someone's like, we're not really raising right now, you're like, I've been set up to be assessing this as an investment. So it's really important up front to set the parameters for what the discussion is. I would say in practice though, we take the coffees because we really like the founders, or we built a relationship over time. So I don't know what the specific advice is. I would just say if we don't know you as well, but you're pitching, be really clear about the goal of the pitch. Either I'm raising money or I'm letting you know what I'm doing because I'm going to be raising 7 months from now, whatever it is. I think always kind of go through a deck. I don't know how the other team would feel, but I feel like go to the effort of structuring your thoughts in a coherent way and then take me through that story. I'm always surprised at how infrequently we get product demos, and how when we do get product demos, how much that changes the tone. And if I think back actually to when we got acquired, the first meeting we just said, here's how our product works. We talked about our product for 45 minutes. And unknowingly at the time, that was all we had that was good. So I didn't want to talk about our revenue or anything else. So it wasn't some genius plan of mine. But it was really, it really gave me an ability to speak and explain how I think about product. And that was where that conversation was so fruitful. So tell us what you're asking for up front so that we can have our minds prepared. I really like someone who's gone to the effort of walking through a well thought out structured deck. Product demos are awesome. Maybe it's just a product demo. Again, I don't want to overstretch that there's hard and fast rules to this. It comes in all shapes and sizes.
Sure. And finally, obviously, you've had a really sort of mixed background of founding your own startups, to exiting, to working at Under Armour, to now being on the other side of the table. Either from a Blackbird perspective or from a personal perspective, what would you like to see more of in Australia or from startup founders that you come across?
Wow. Well, I think like the one thing that we're really conscious of is Australian founders look different at the start compared to what Silicon Valley founders. So I was talking to a friend who just did an investment, and I was like, well, how did you know the founder? And he's like, well, when he was 19, he was head of performance at insert very serious large website here. And you're like, God, there are lots of stories like that. Oh, they went through Stanford, did computer science at Stanford, then interned at Palantir, and then went to Slack as a product manager, and now they're doing a company. So you can just pattern match these like extraordinary Silicon Valley founders who have like a similar story. Australians don't look like that. So Tim from Zoox did an animation agency before he did Zoox. Didier ran Rising Sun Pictures. Michael from Shoes of Prey was at Google. Cliff and Mel from Canva did like a yearbooks startup. So if you're a Silicon Valley investor, you'd be looking at those things going, I don't know how to match this. So we realized like Australian founders come in all shapes and sizes. And so we feel like we'll look past almost anything to try and get to the core, like a sliver of brilliance. So I would just say like we don't look for anything really, but like we are waiting for this moment of kind of inspiration. And the one thing that always gets us as a fund is when someone comes to us and teaches us something about their customers that we'd never thought of, like proves to us that they're the world expert on this customer set. So it just speaks to so many other good habits that company will end up having. It speaks to like the fact that you're out talking to customers, that you've thought about it, that you're thinking customer first, that you're thinking about product. All these things that that will be embedded in the culture, we want to see that early.
Cool. Nick, that's it from me. Thanks a lot for sharing your time and insights today.
Awesome.
It's been fantastic. So now we'll open it up for audience Q&A.
Awesome.
You're ready to fire away? Yeah, leave it on. Any takers?
The video's on, just
So what do you prefer a really early stage team, like an actual the founders?
Has to be sort of something very outlier about them. Kind of like, here's most of humanity and then here's them. So like fresh and strange. So we're looking for something fresh and strange.
And like tech skills or?
Yeah, but Cliff and Mel from Canva didn't come out the gate as this extraordinary technical team that had been at, Google or Atlassian. So ideally, there's like technical skills, great storytelling. So you have to be able to tell a great story to your team about what you're doing, great story to investors about what you're doing, great story to customers about what you're doing. So great storytelling is huge. One thing I've been thinking more and more about, this is not a fully formed thought, but what I'm looking for is like a founder to empower me to tell their story to someone else in a compelling way. And if I'm like, this may be like just me not being that smart, but someone was pitching us like a better way to do AI the other day, and I explained it to my brother, and he asked me one question, and I was like, I have no idea. Like I just realized like I had not come out of the hour and a half that we spent really empowered to do that. Whereas I know nothing about microchips, but we have a company that like told me a story about the chip that they were building, and I was able to tell my mum, who knows nothing about chips, and be like, isn't it crazy that the chip in your Nest wakes up 3 times a second, and that's why you need 6 batteries? Like, that made sense to my mum, but I didn't have to understand how the chip works. So great storytelling is really important, and the measure of great storytelling is, can someone else tell your story really easily? So great storytellers, slightly fresh and strange. Nikki calls it the 2 shits founders. So do they give a shit and can they get shit done? So we're looking for evidence of both those. You kind of want to feel like they're a run through walls type of human being, because we just kind of know now the resilience that it takes to do anything new in the world. So we're kind of looking for that, like, wow, this person will not be stopped. This person won't give us reasons why something can't be done. They'll just get it done. There's probably more, but I would say at the high level, those are the things we look for. Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, do you want to just start off with your name as well?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
My name's Simon. I'm the founder of Growth Live. What do you think is the biggest misconception of what founders think investors want to hear, and like how do you think it's quicker to like cut through like that whole process of like we go in with like a perception of what you guys want to hear? What do you think is the biggest mistake that you're making in the pitch?
Good question. So some obvious ones is like, we just want to get to know you. So some founders feel like, oh, bring in someone really experienced who can who know, like, oh, they can introduce me to investors and they can kind of like guide me. It's like, no, that's not interesting. So like, even if you're unpolished, this is like a Blackbird perspective. So even if you're unpolished, we just want to meet you. I do see like, there are some slides in the decks that we get sent that I'm always like, straight past. So like IBIS World Report on Market Size slide is always many billions of dollars. So like it just doesn't matter what the number to me is, because it's just like, yeah, I get it. I think like a lot of people will be like, oh, what's the Sequoia guide to doing a deck? And they'll just give us like that, as opposed to like every company has like a specific story. And like, we just want to hear like your story. How did you meet? Why did you decide to work on this? Why is this your life's work? Why are you uniquely placed to do this? Why is now the time that you need to do this? What is the evidence that you have, no matter how small, that this is like something, you're onto something here? So I think you can be like pretty unique with the story. And there's so much generic deck building going on right now that it definitely blurs. And so I'll just go team, and I'll do like LinkedIn search on the team. Like I have to filter. So the deck should be my filter, and then I end up having to filter the decks. So like you're trying to make a 30-second decision on whether it's worth having a follow-up meeting. Is this proper? Like, have someone put thought into this? But like, that's one that I find interesting. I don't know, I'm trying to think what I used to think that like what I wish I could have told myself before when I was fundraising. One that's like kind of comforting to founders, I think, is venture capital is like an inappropriate source of capital for most human beings and companies. Like it has such specific demands on what a company needs to do that I think you can basically take most of the rejection non-personally, because like within that framework, you also have like firms with a very narrow thesis. And so I used to take rejection very personally, but now like doing the rejections, you realize like actually it's not personal at all, and you can really appreciate and think someone's smart and awesome and like phenomenal human being, and also not invest in them. But I think the difficulty on the founder entrepreneur side is, as an entrepreneur, you're doing your life's work, and rejecting your life's work is a rejection of you. But to us, it just doesn't feel like that at all. And in a way, the quicker we can tell you no, we're not a good fit for you, the better it is for you to go back and do work. So I think I definitely I think I did 60 meetings, and I think 54 people said no, and I just was staggered that like how bad I must have been to get so many no's. And the kind of generic advice is all you need is a yes, but like genuinely all you need is a yes. The no's mean kind of nothing. What else? I think the other thing that's kind of weird is founders will interpret sort of friendliness as interest. And like you see when a firm wants to do a deal, it's like a full court press. Like you have to be like, I can barely breathe. Whereas it's like, yeah, keep in touch, come back to us when you've got more traction, is like usually code for no. So something we try and do at Blackbird is like, we can't say to a founder, you're too early, because that's just code for, I don't want to do this investment, or come back when you have more traction, or there's a list of things we can't say. We have to actually give reasons why, because it forces us to be like, what am I actually saying? So I do see founders being like, yeah, they were really interested. And I was like, have they followed up? No. How long ago was the meeting? 2 weeks. They're not like, no, yeah, like I think you see it's so infrequent that you find something that you're in love with, that when it's there, there's this sense of anxiety not to let it slip, and so you don't go 2 weeks without. Yeah, does that make sense? Yeah. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Zubin. So Nick, I had a question. Several times during the session you mentioned that it's hard to find really good people.
Yeah.
Look for that sliver, and I think you brought that point home really well, that there are actually less of them than you'd expect.
Yeah.
And then one other point you also said, I'm just trying to reconcile the two statements, you flush something out here. And another point of time you said, if someone's truly in love with or wanting to do a startup, why did they wait that long?
Yeah.
How many times do you think we miss out on people who went through a certain life journey for whatever reason, came to it late, realized this is what they want to do, but then they got dismissed because they hadn't done it previously? There could be really great people that are missing out, slightly older people, more experienced people, who may not need to break through some of the walls because they've experienced enough to avoid the walls in the first place.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that at all?
Yeah, so like no individual like exists in a vacuum. Like every individual is great or not in the context of their operating. And so like the example is, if you flip the CEOs of Palantir and Uber, would they be as awesome as their jobs as where they actually were? So it's a very fine line that we have to tread. Okay, so one signal that we would interpret is if you did a bunch of things. So like if you're at Telstra for 9 years, I would find it, and then you were at Optus for 4. There would have to be a compelling reason why you did such, like, I'm sorry if either of Telstra or...
Yeah. I didn't know whether you guys had spoken before. That's hilarious. That's actually...
But 3 different careers, so...
Yeah.
Keep going. Because I'll give you an alternative point of view on this.
That's one of my worst ever. I'm glad we
and
caught
it's
it
on
on
tape,
camera.
yeah.
Wow. Okay, so let me if you've repeatedly done things that in my estimation aren't like the things that I'm looking for, that aren't that outlier thing, then I'm going to have to figure out the reason why. And there are like a bunch of really good reasons. So family, but like I just feel like the truth is right there, and like it's just always a question to me of like, what is the reason? Can't believe I chose Telstra again. Sorry, I'm trying to recover. So what was your counter?
Well, my counter is so there are 2 points in this, right? One is my personal story, but that's just me.
Yeah.
Because migrant, grew up in another country, very different values, etc.
Yeah.
Had to freaking survive.
Yeah.
Changed careers against all the advice of people. Because I started off as a lawyer. Was good at it, but it wasn't what I wanted to do. But I had to get my citizenship. So I shut up and did it for 4.5 years.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I developed patterns and so on that I had to break out. So I got it. But there's another guy I met who's from Thailand, who is going to.
Can I just before you go there, like that's your story though.
Yeah. That's me.
So your story, you wouldn't come and tell me like I've been at Telstra for the last 9 years. You would have told me that story, which actually speaks to a whole different set of values. Anyway, you're good.
On LinkedIn, that's the story you're in.
100%.
Right? So,
Yeah, 100%.
And you would have missed the nuances of why I made certain decisions and how hard it's been and all the rest of that. But that's just my story. What worries me is there's a kid I met recently from Thailand who is this close to giving up hope, right?
Yeah.
But he's got more staying power than I've seen in anybody in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Right? What I worry about is he doesn't speak English that well. He's trying really hard. He's an engineer. He's done really well. He's got awards for the kind of work, grit, intelligence he's demonstrated.
Yeah.
But he's being turned down again and again from a regular corporate job. And he has nowhere to go, and he needs to go back to Thailand. He's worried about that. Right?
Is he a good engineer?
Hey?
Is he a good engineer?
He topped his uni apparently, so he got sort of recognized.
Why is he doing a corporate job?
So that was my question to him. That this is where culture comes in.
You know Matter, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is where culture comes in because he feels he needs corporate experience because that was what his upbringing told him. Now, I come from that background, kind of not similar. But I sort of recognized that, and I said, so what's stopping you from starting your own thing now? Just give me a practice. He said PR. waiting and I'm waiting and I'm trying, right? And I listened to the story and I said, now, if I was, and sorry to be quite blunt about this, but if I was born and brought up in Australia, I probably wouldn't have related to the story quite as much as I could because I went through a kind of similar journey.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, he said 107 rejections so far from government job, right? And I suspect it's because his English is not, his spoken English isn't that great, I suspect. But I look at it and I say, how many people like him have we lost out on? Because I know people who speak English 100 times better than him that don't have a tenth of his staying power and his faith and his courage. And I think, what are we doing for people on that? How often are we using heuristics that disqualify and dismiss people that...
Yeah, like, this is like an embarrassing example of how unconscious bias plays out. Like, I've actually just given you an example of my unconscious bias. The problem is, to survive my job, I have to make quick decisions. So I would happily meet, based on what you just told me, I'm like, that seems pretty interesting, but my questions would be, so when I was the same as you, I wasn't even a good lawyer, I was a bad lawyer, and I didn't like it. So I did in that year where you have to like get your, whatever it's called,
The articles?
before the one before that, where you go and work in a law firm.
Yeah, it was called, well, I don't know what it was called here, when I did it was something else.
13 people said no to me, and I was like, that's probably enough. Like, I didn't need to get to 107 to know that I was like, no, wrong path.
Yeah.
But the second thing is, like, the risk profile of an entrepreneur needs to be one that isn't externally referencing, because it's miserable for 2 years, and everyone thinks what you're doing is shit. And so, like, if you're someone that requires like that external validation, then maybe you don't, because the first 2 years are both shit and the easiest it'll ever be. So like, if you're someone that is like, oh god, well, I'm a year and a half into this and no one thinks what I'm doing is good, so I would be like, why did he not stop after 15 rejections? I just want to dig in more to it. So two points. High level, I'm deeply biased. I wish that I wasn't. Part of it is necessity and part of it is something that we're going to miss. The second thing is, like, you just need to dig in. So whether it's your story or his, the real story isn't the LinkedIn, it's the story.
Correct, yeah.
And the hard thing for him is how he gets to matter. But like, if he's the other question I would have is, like, if he's such a good engineer, like, every person I know who's running a company is dying for great engineering talent. I don't know what your experience is, but I don't think the English thing that you're describing would be.
Well, I mean, he's a materials engineer, so he's not a software engineer.
Right. Sorry.
I did say engineering.
I hear engineer and I'm like,
I know, and I realized, my bad. That's why I left the law, because I left important words out.
just as well. Yeah, but like, I think like that if you are looking for external value, like there's internally at Pixar, they say Pixar movies are bad for 2 years. So Finding Nemo was bad for 2 years while they figured it out. But if you need someone to be like, no, your movie's awesome, I love what you're doing all the time, you're going to run out of steam pretty quickly in startups. Like, just be like really frank. I think that's why I'm better on this side of the table than I was an entrepreneur, because I don't have the emotional resilience to just suck and get punched in the face over and over and over and be like, oh, I kind of like this. Like, actually, I found that like incredibly draining, and like constantly having to be like, yeah, I know, it's like all the evidence tells me that I'm sucking right now. I took money from investors, I have customers, I have employees. None of that matters, I just have to do it. Like that like pit of the gut energy that you have to have. I don't know, like, it's not for everyone. And it's better if people opt out of it. Like it's just really hard. Like, it's really, really hard. It definitely gets harder. So all the stuff that I found really difficult gets way harder at Series A when you have 40 staff, or way harder when you have to lay off 11 of your team of 24. You know, like, it just gets harder and harder and harder. So the thing that we're optimizing for is internal referencing. But that's not to say that we're not biased. I apologize for using such a specific example.
It is the right example, because it's exactly where I'm at anyway.
Yeah.
and that's why I'm here. So
Yeah.
for another thing. But just to go back to close the loop on one of the questions I did ask you about is, I guess the secondary to that is, what follows up from that is, how do you, if it's that hard, and we have so much talent that is experienced, but just don't have the wherewithal to go through that, how do we solve for that? How do we solve for having more older and more experienced people create things of value, that could potentially be shape-shifting, not game-changing?
Yeah. Thank you.
And how do we not disqualify them from these opportunities?
I'm not sure if this answers your question, but I think I've been an employee, a founder, investor. So the only two things that I think about are what is my rate of learning and what kind of people am I around. And it doesn't matter what my title is, CEO, product manager, venture partner, whatever. So whether I think, I don't know if this answers your question, but for each of the, and going to my earlier point of no individual exists without the context that they're in. So someone who's really struggling at Telstra might thrive somewhere else. So I think all of that being said, I think we probably have the right amount of the founders are just going to be there anyway. And so I think really the key is, the question is, can those founders identify this talent that you're describing? And I think the answer is yes. But listen, it's complicated.
Cool. Yep. I think we've got just time for 2 more questions. So here at Tom.
Hey Nick, Tom McGrath.
Hi mate.
Hey, Startmate coming to Melbourne, which is quite frothy at the moment in terms of accelerators and things happening. So I'd be interested to understand, what do you think the 1 or 2 really unique things that Startmate's going to bring to the Melbourne community is?
Yeah, so the one differentiator of Startmate is the community. So the founders that have been through the program and the mentors that invest in the program. I think that's it. It's just a really unique group of people, both on the founder side and now 6 years in on the alumni side. So if there's a differentiator, it's the 60-ish mentors and 50 teams. And kind of when you wash everything away, it's just that you get fast-track access to a group of people that are going to care about you, and who you can ask questions of and expect a fair and reasonable answer. And there's this Charlie Munger quote that I'm not going to get it quite right, but it's the highest form of civilization is a trusted community operating rationally. And that's kind of what Startmate is. It's a trusted community, has a really core set of values, and it operates pretty rationally. If someone asks for help, people will come back and give it. Because of the way Nicky set it up, the people he recruited and the teams he recruited, there is such a strong pay it forward mentality. Matt is a mentor. Matt is in here, who's in the current batch. I've seen Matt pay it forward to teams. I've seen Matt get a lot of support from the mentors in the group. I think there's just a lot of evidence for that. But ultimately, it's just a group of people. And when everything else washes away, that is what matters. That will become your group of people. And depending on how much you want to invest in it and get out of it, that for a lot of people will go on to be there, a big part of their lives. And that's been my experience. From investing in it and then having really dear friends who've been through the program and now at job working at Blackbird Ventures, which is it's a really good community of people. You had a question?
In the spirit of Snap being valued at 24 billion, I
Sure.
was thinking about when you sold sessions, you said you got 250 customers. And given that you're investing a lot of pre-sale sort of businesses, what's special about the valuations and how important are the valuations when you're going to when people come to you?
Well, the companies that have, oddly, and this is sort of more anecdotal than statistical, but the companies that have gone on to be worth the most had the highest valuations when they came in the door. So it's an odd positive signal. Although in saying that, I might be ruining it because everyone's just going to come in the door asking for crazy valuations. It matters a little bit, within a range, and then not that much if it all works out really well.
You can't use the usual DCF, you can't use the IBIS bold.
Sure.
What are you sort of looking at metrics? Are you just looking at comparable multiples?
In later stages, we're always looking at that, but at the seed round, it's kind of like Australian seed rounds are done at like 4, US seed rounds are done at like 5, 8 at the high end. You're kind of just looking for something in the range of reasonable, but kind of optimizing and finagling too early on valuation and all that sort of stuff I think proves to be not that useful. You'd rather just find something that's fair and reasonable and let the founders get back to it, and probably don't. It's probably not an optimization area for us, especially at the early stage, because there's just like a pretty clear set of parameters of hundreds of thousands of companies that have now raised at or about, they raise $1 million, they're worth $4 or $5 million when you do the round. Like, sometimes we stretch, but it ends up not being as much of a thing as you realize. Yeah, and whether Snap's worth $24 billion or not, it's a different question, but Snap's an amazing company.
Sure is.
It's a weird way to end.
That is a weird way to end, but Nick, thanks once again for your time today, and everyone, thanks for your questions and for joining us for this interview.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to episode 39 of the Startup Playbook Podcast. You can find the show notes of my interview with Nick, along with a curated list of tools and resources for startup founders at startupplaybook.co. As always, you can join the conversation through our Twitter account. The handle is @PlaybookStartup. Next week, I will be interviewing Stuart Richardson and Darcy Norton, the co-founders of York Butter Factory and partners of Adventure Capital. In the interview, we will be talking about creating a sustainable startup ecosystem, the collaboration opportunities between startups and corporates, and overcoming the challenges of scaling a business from 3 to 250 employees. Don't forget to check out the first 3 episodes of Startup Playbook TV on YouTube and subscribe to stay up to date with our latest episodes. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at episode 40 next week.